Hi, this is Tom Matthews from Friday the 13th, Part 6. You're listening to the Necronomicast.
Hello, everybody. This is Brian from Necronomicast. Thank you for tuning in for this exciting 13th season of the show. Couldn't do it without you. Now, if you're ever wondering if there was a kind of a fun and inexpensive way that you could support the production of the show, I've got news for you. You can go to buymeacoffee.com/Necronomicast. Every time I have an author on the show, I've purchased their book. Whenever a documentary filmmaker or a creative person is on the show to talk about their project, you know I've supported their project. So if you go to buymeacoffee.com/Necronomicast, that will enable me to continue to do the work that I do here on the show. So I thank you so very much from the bottom of my heart for all of the support and encouragement you've given me over the years. And you know what? If you buy me a cup of coffee at the website, I would be more than happy to deliver a personalized message to you on the show. 2 or more cups of coffee, you're going to get something in the mail. buymeacoffee.com/Necronomicast. And now, on with the show. From the historic, haunted heartland of Omaha, Nebraska, my name is Brian Corey, and it is my pleasure to welcome you all once again to another episode of the world-famous Necronomicast. Tonight, my guest for a late-night conversation and for a special Halloween episode, a bonus episode for you all, is filmmaker Vincent DiSanti. Vincent's on once again to talk to us about his brand new film, Never Hike Alone 2, and the trials and tribulations it takes to make a Friday the 13th fan film that transcends other fan films and really eclipses many of the entries in the original franchise. So join me and Vincent DiSanti at the bottom of Crystal Lake as we talk about Never Hike Alone 2. And now calling in from Camp Crystal Lake, Wessex County, New Jersey, I've got Vincent DiSanti here from Womp Stomp Films. Vincent, my man, how are you?
Doing well, Brian. How you doing?
Great. I am so excited to have you back on the show. I was looking through the vast Necronomicast archives. I had you on October 13th, 2020 for an episode. Wow. Never Hike in the Snow was the focus of that episode. And, you know, we've kind of emerged from the pandemic. You know, everybody's going back to the theaters and everything. And I thought, well, hey, we're going to have another Friday the 13th film at any time now. But we don't have a studio film. But what we have available from you, I think, is just as good, if not better, than a studio offering. So to have you on the show once again, what an honor and a treat, man. Especially just right after the premiere of your new feature.
Oh, well, thanks for having me. Yeah, that's funny that that was the last date because that was the release date for Never Hike in the Snow. So yeah, we jumped from project to project here. Here we are 3 years later now with the sequel finally, with the rest of the story that I came out to tell.
Yeah, so I'm going to be a fanboy just for a second here and tell you how much I really enjoyed the film. The last time you were on the program, we had a great conversation of what Friday the 13th meant to the both of us, and we talked about your history too. So I invite everybody, if you want to know more about Vincent, then go back to episode 189 of Necronomicast, because we talked at length about your formation as a filmmaker and everything up to the point of Never Hike in the Snow. So now we're going to have a fresh new conversation about this awesome movie that you just put together.
Cool. Thank you.
So yeah, let's talk about it. Never Hike Alone 2. Now I know
correct.
When you were coming out with these projects, you were thinking about taking this feature and splitting it up into more episodic versions, but you decided just because of time and everything else and how your schedule worked and just the creative process to make one feature out of this. So can we talk a little bit about like what went into making this particular installment?
Well, it was sort of, it was disassembly, reassembly, really, because Never Hike Alone 2 always started as a feature film. There was actually a very there was one very specific story that I wanted to follow if I got everything right. Like if I could get Jennifer Cook back and I could get Vin back and I could get all those things. And I pitched that to Tom and he loved it. He introduced me to Vinny. I pitched it to Vinny. He loved it. And then I was like, Tom, so what about Jen? Well, what's she up to these stations? He's like, she does not do any of this stuff. She has no kind of like that. So I kind of like held out hope for that. And then was thinking if that didn't go through, I would split them up. You know what I mean? I came up with the idea of doing Never Hike in the Snow. And I was like, oh, I could do this as a prequel. And Never Hike in the Snow was really, when I first conceived it, something very different. It wasn't as tied in. It was more of a disappear type film where it wasn't connected to any necessarily through line other than Jason and killing some people in a really cool way. But when I broke it apart, I kind of like wove Never Hike in the Snow into it. And I wove that into the story of like the opening act. And I took the opening act and I made that the next film, which would have been Never Hike Again. And then I took the second act and kind of worked that out a little bit. And that became Jason Takes Crystal Lake, and then took the ending of the film and worked that out even more. And that was the final hike. And so when we were doing the miniseries idea, it was like very, very like digestible, budget wise, productions that we could, do with a crowdfund that we could raise at that time, because we were raising about $50,000 was our max. I think we maybe raised 50 or 60 for the home video campaign, and over in total, we raised about 70. So I was like, well, if this is all we can raise, this is probably what we're going to do. And Never Hike in the Snow really taught us that we had a little bit more value, that, we raised about $74,000 on a $50,000 estimate. Eventually we ended up raising a good $100,000 to do that project, but then also discovered that it's really expensive to shoot in the snow. We were able to make the first episode. And then we were getting ready to like roll those funds over into, another film and do some other stuff. And then all of a sudden COVID hit. And after waiting for a long time and, having the fans have to wait for the conclusion of the story for so long, I didn't want to have to go through the process of going through multiple crowd funds in order to get this story done, because it would have taken so many years to do it. The joke's on me in the end here, because so I sort of went and said, well, you know what? This all used to be one story. So let's just put it all back together. Let's see if we can raise about $150,000. I think if we raised 125 with snow, I think that, 150 is a good idea. And to say, hey, fans, if you really want this, let's just do it all now. Let's not wait. Let's just go ahead and do it. So the film fit right back together as the way it was. There were certain things I had to cut out and things like that for time and budget to get it down to $150,000 budget to be done on that time. But it was still the essential like bones of like the big picture, and it would have given everybody what they wanted. It would have given them faster. And the idea was that we were going to do it in 2022. We ended up raising the money in, March of 2022, March and April. And we were supposed to be ready to go by June of that year. And scheduling delays and production delays and other things got in the way. And lo and behold, it ended up taking, 2 years to get done anyway, and about probably like a year and a half, 18 months, which is about the same amount of time it took us to produce Never Hike Alone 1. Only we weren't shooting this entire time. We were waiting for very specific pockets to shoot, because this is a much different film. We're not just going out with one person in the forest and, basically picking off our days where we could shoot individual things for almost no money. It was every time we went to set, the army was coming with us. It was the entire cavalry. And we were out there with all of our, our production teams and effects and stunts and vehicles and locations and all these things. So it was a much bigger and different project. So it definitely made it, the idea to try to keep it together was definitely the best and most cost-saving way. It just so happened that, again, things we couldn't predict, where we had a state of emergency in the state of California because of all the precipitation we got over the winter, and ended up delaying our first week of shooting into the last week of June. We were supposed to shoot that the second week of April. And, like anything, it was just constant dodging of huge pitfalls that could have derailed the production entirely, and just sort of working our way through them, continuing to crowdfund. And what we thought was going to be, bonus money. We thought like, oh, get up to $250,000. We'll do all these extra things. All of that money was like, no, we need this money just to get the film done.
Right.
Just keep going. And, you know, it was a big learning lesson in a lot of different things about, you know, the contingency of what happens when you split up productions in this way, especially productions of this size. We felt it much more than we would have on the original Never Hike Alone. And because it was 16 days of shooting, it wasn't a, you know, very specific 1 week, 5 days of just going out there and doing it like, you know, Never Hike in the Snow was. It definitely took a bigger toll. It cost a lot more money. But at the same time, we were able to do what we did this Friday the 13th, which is put the entire package together, the rest of the story, give it to the fans and give them as much as we can with it and, you know, finish the story like we promised. And I think that people, you know, I was even as a viewer of it, I wanted people to know the story. I wanted people to know the ending. So it was a big challenge to do this independently. But I'm glad that we pushed through and persevered and we were able to get it out. And once again, on a Friday the 13th, we, you know, give Friday the 13th fans something to smile about rather than another one passing and there's no projects to watch.
Well, what's exciting as a fan watching this, and, you know, and I read like a lot of the comments because this movie's available free right now. You can go watch it free on YouTube. Yeah. You can watch the whole thing, uncensored, unedited, free. And so I went and I'm looking like comments, you know, and I usually don't pay attention to comments, especially when it comes to my show or reviews and things like that. But man, there's so many great comments and so many people are thanking you for putting this movie out and doing such a great service to the franchise and to the character and to the mythology, what you've introduced to the mythology. I just have to say, like, it is so satisfying of a film to watch. Like, it is. Like I thought Never Hike Alone was great. And I really enjoyed Never Hike in the Snow. But your talent as a filmmaker, the way you frame shots, the lighting, the score, I want to talk about the score too. Like every part of it meets or exceeds so much of the original studio franchise that are made for millions and millions of dollars that are that you know, hundreds of people work on the set and the design and everything else. You've got a fraction of all that, and yet you've put together this mythology, this storyline. Everything about it is so satisfying to those of us that enjoy all kinds of Friday the 13th entertainment. So it's just amazing that you've been able to do this with. I mean, it's a lot of money, but it's a shoestring budget compared to what a studio can do. It's you can't be commended enough from one fan to another, because I know you're a super fan for putting this together.
Yeah, well, I mean, it really comes down to the crew too, because they're the ones who are taking like extreme discounts to work out there. A lot of people are volunteering their time, you know, putting their hard-earned money back into the movie. You know, actually all of the producing crew and a lot of like the core like production crew really don't get paid. Like we all just go out there. We have to sacrifice a weekend of work, or we have to take off a week of work, or do those things. But you know, we have to be smart and save and do those things because we want all the money to go into the movie. And we want to be able to get as many people out there to do it, because it's not easy to do this alone. And I couldn't do this alone if it wasn't for my production design team to help me find the places that we had to shoot. If it wasn't spending months doing scouting trips and finding the right places and putting the time in. If it's not Evan Butka showing up with his camera and, you know, Gonzalo showing up with all the G&E equipment and knowing how to do these things. I think what I'm really good at is that I've found and surrounded myself with a bunch of very talented people. And I try to give them the budget and the setting and the opportunity to show off their skills in the individual, you know, departments that they work in, whether it be like Nora Hewitt and Cody Wilkins in effects, or Jess Bennett in stunts, and then Brian as a stunt actor and things like that. I think about the tools and the resources that I have, that I'm available with, and I write to them. And I just so happen to be surrounded by a bunch of talented people. I have an eye for finding really nice places to film, but I also got help from my friends in the Jason Rising project who helped me find that beautiful lake that we shot the teaser for, and then the ending of the movie. And it's just having a vision and sort of understanding the people that are around you and what tools you have around you. And it's sort of being, you know, it's like being the leader of an orchestra. And, you know, and speaking of music, Ryan Perez Dapple, knowing that I can rely on him, that when Mike and I are working in editorial, my editor, Mike Appy, that we're cutting an attempt score, but we know when we hand it over to Ryan, it's going to get better. We're not going to be borrowing from Godzilla and, Mad Max and things that are helping us get through the cut to time it right. But he comes in and he gives it that twinge that just makes it feel like this is of our world, of what we established with Never Hike Alone, what he continued with in Never Hike in the Snow. Same thing goes with like the reuse of Trevor Vaughn's songs at the end of each film, the way we use them in the credits, and each of them speak to the, what has gone on to the movie. And it just so happens that he happens to be a friend of mine. And honestly, and that's what it is. I feel like this little snowball that started rolling 7 years ago, and I've picked up people along the way with me, and the people who have been inspired to do it have stuck with it, and that we keep rolling down the hill and the crew keeps getting bigger. And, at the other end of it is that we now have this team that when we step into doing our own independent production, or we're looking at traditional financing, or if we have to crowdfunding that's something that's original idea, the Never Hike Alone series has really sort of established a base for us to say like, hey, we can do this. We do know how to handle IP. We can tell story. We can make it look professional. We can do it for a decent budget. But we'd like to work on an actual budget. If you handed us something that, Hollywood had, we could hire even more people to help these people, and we can make even bigger and better things. And we, we'll be responsible with it, and we'll deliver something that story-wise and entertainment-wise is going to deliver and keep people invested. And I think that, if, the customer reviews are good, you're going to go to that restaurant. So I would say the studios should start lining up and eating at old Womp Stomp Films Diner.
For sure. Now, I know you don't do this as like as an audition, strictly as an audition for big Hollywood films, but this has got to turn heads. This has got to absolutely put somebody on the Womp Stomp fan page.
I mean, I've definitely been able to have certain conversations with people, and I've met producers and I've met writers and other directors, and I've been on the festival circuit, and I've I think, I was on the set of, I was working on Chad season 2 for TBS. And one of the directors that was on there, that, I have obviously a ton of Never Hike Alone swag, and I wear it because it's comfy. If there's ever an endorsement to go to the Indiegogo and get the shirts, I wear the shirts. Like, not because I want to self-promote, but because they're super comfy and they're better than what I buy at the store, and they're cheaper than what I buy at the store.
Right.
So I'd rather just like wear those on set. And so a director came up to me and he was like, "Hey man, you saw that movie? It's pretty good, huh?" And I was like, "Saw it, I directed it." He was like, "What?" I was like, "Yeah, man." He's like, I'm the guy who put that all together." And he was like, "You be proud. That's really cool." And I've had a few people, like I was on the set of American Horror Story, and the effects team came up to me and they were like, "Hey man, you're Vinny, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah." Like, "Oh, we worked with Kelsey, or, we know Nora, and we watched Never Hike Alone, man. That was rad. We had a lot of good time with it. That's really cool stuff." So, and then, obviously other alumni reaching out. I've talked to certain people at studio level and independent level, and everyone's very encouraging. And everyone keeps saying the same thing is, when you do something original? What's the first original project? And I'm definitely like, on the road to that. But I felt, as we probably talked last time about this, is I just felt compelled to tell this story. This thing was burrowing a hole through me. That like it had to come out. It was like the baby that wouldn't come out. The world wouldn't let me birth it. It was like a 3-year pregnancy.
Right.
And finally got this thing out, and it feels good. It feels like that weight is off the shoulders, that I don't have to like be in an interview and be like, "Well, the story's coming or the answers are coming. Just please trust me." It's like, no, here, their proof is in the pudding. We did what we said we were going to do. We did what no one would ever expect of of a fan film. We shouldn't be carrying as much weight as we have. The studios and the rights issues and all those things have sort of set this up for us to succeed in a certain way. Not that I wouldn't trade this in so we would have, studio films going forward, but I can't say that if we would have gotten those studio films, we would have been as satisfied with something that said like, "Listen, there's unfinished business." I mean, when it comes to telling the story of Friday the 13th, it's like opening up a drawer that just has like everything dumped into it. It's that sweep drawer. And you're like, somebody needs to make sense of this. And I just felt compelled to go in and sort of make some kind of sense of it and give people closure that I think is sort of been an albatross around the neck of the Friday the 13th franchise, where it's like, yeah, you guys want to start telling new stories, but it doesn't feel like you're ever really stopped telling the old one. So what happened with that? And so to do this in a way that we did, I think answers a lot of fans' questions. And I've seen the comments too, where people feel the same way I did. This is why I did it. I wanted resolution to the Tommy Jarvis saga. I wanted resolution to the Paramount era. I do not accept New Line as like specific canon. Yes, they're official films, but do they really fit into what happened through those first 8 films? Not to say 7 and 8 were all that in line, but at least there was some type of consistency in tone, and they picked up where the last one left off, and then delivered a film with Jason in it, which was really nice. But then, I just feel like as a fan, it's just been I've been waiting since 93. You know what I mean? Like, it's been like, well, where does this story go? How does it end? What is the final capper? And to take the story threads that I did and weave them together just seemed to make the most sense. And it was just funny that I never intended to make Never Hike Alone 1, but Never Hike Alone 1 became like the perfect sort of pebble to get the avalanche going. It was something where it was never intended to sort of intercede with the Friday the 13th franchise, just be its own standalone thing. But Kyle's story really seamlessly fit in, and that's what I liked about it. And I liked the way that it blended with Tom. And I liked this version of Tommy, the way he grew up and sort of found himself, but still battles with his demons and the curse kind of looming over the entire town. Like it's Derry, Maine, and, kind of had those types of vibes. So it just felt good to get this story out, because I always felt that Friday the 13th, as fun of a franchise it is, never made much sense. But, you could sit back and be like, wow, with everything that it has, imagine if it did make more sense, it would be even better. And for me, I think that, I just tried to say, like, there are themes here to explore. There's actual emotion that can be explored. There's other things than just showing, pretty teens, getting naked and getting killed. There's a little bit more than that we could do in a modern age with the filmmaking that, we expect out of films today. You can't just go back on the beach party massacres that they would throw together in the 80s. That just isn't the type of films that, are successful in the box office anymore. And if they want to be successful with Friday the 13th has to evolve. And I hope that in a way that this was an inspiration to future filmmakers, or, when the studios look back and they see the success that Never Hike has had on this scale, that can probably be replicated at a studio level with much better results as far as it going to the box office and making them a lot of money.
Yeah, absolutely. Now here's some things as a guy that I'm a huge Friday the 13th fan. In our last conversation, I told you that how I'm kind of known around this part of the country. The Midwest is kind of the Friday the 13th nerd guy. People ask me questions about it all the time. I host things, parties, and I had to wait a day to watch Never Hike Alone 2, because the day before Friday the 13th, I was hosting a 1 through 4 marathon at the Alamo Draft House. And so, I watched 1 through 4 there in the theater with everybody. And one of the things I was doing, instead of introducing each film, I was talking about, boy, what did we just see? Like, how does 2 go into 3? With all the problems that are there. And then how does 3 go into 4? And there's not as many problems as 2 into 3. But, how do these films evolve? And what I like about what you've done, you've had like these decades to kind of sit back, watch these films over and over, and kind of in your mind make a little glue for these and kind of snip these loose ends a little bit. And I like your mythology of Jason, but also of Crystal Lake, how Crystal Lake is almost in that whole region, the whole land is its own character. It's cursed land, but it goes way beyond just something like something lazy, like a Native American burial ground kind of thing. It's like it was cursed way before the Native Americans came here. There's something about the land. There's something about the earth in that area that just cultivates this mayhem. And it's so there's no blame to any part of society. They did this, and that's why the land's cursed. It's just cursed. We don't know why. It's gone back since the beginning of time. Yeah, and that's brilliant. And I love how the fact that Jason's the vehicle of this, and your ghost Jason, as it's credited, he's not necessarily a ghost. He's like an elemental. He's kind of like a forest spirit.
Revenant.
Yeah. But he's brought forth because of this terrible thing that happened to him as a child. It's almost like the lake kind of conjured and like coaxed Jason into the water to drown. And then his mom went crazy because of all this. Well, the cursed area had something to do with it. It wasn't just, it wasn't, it's just such rich storytelling, and it opens the door to so many more, great plot lines and things. So help me out here. And I think I know where you're going with this, but like your version of Jason, as we see him in these, your ghost cut, which I really enjoyed watching that too. And Never Hike Alone, too. It takes place in the same realm as the Paramount films. Like, help me out. Like, because of Tommy Jarvis, obviously the connection to all this, but like, how do you think that Jason came back from Manhattan? Is it just spiritually, supernaturally kind of came back after the events of that and retreated?
Yeah, let me, I'll just pitch it. Like, so we had this idea that we wanted to do the Ghost of Crystal Lake, which would have been the origin of Ghost Jason story, which is, in other words, Jason escapes Manhattan in another world. And I'll just pitch the opening of the movie. I mean, imagine just being Jason, being washed down. I mean, you're going down a ride. It's like going down a water slide, but it's toxic waste. It's burning your skin. It's burning your clothes. It hurts. You're screaming on the inside, but you have no lungs, so you can't scream. And you're just bouncing off pipes and sewer covers and ladders and all these different things that are washing you out. And all of a sudden you're spitting to the Hudson River and you're floating to the lake bed, and, it's cooling down, but there's almost nothing left of you. And you feel nothing but bones and dust. Like, you just feel like, here it is. This is it. And you land, at the bottom of that bed, and you're laying at the bottom of the river. And as he's just sitting there like, that sucked, he hears his mother call out.
Yeah.
She goes, Jason. And he just turns his head, and she's like, come home. And so he picks his weary ass up and he starts walking. And the movie is a 2-part story where you cut to these interceding scenes where, along this story, Jason is making his way back to Crystal Lake slowly but surely, being found, in the dumpster of a rest stop, being found walking through a campsite, being found, do these just little things, interacting with people along the way, this specter that's just sort of scaring the shit out of people as he's just trying to get home, and murdering people along the way too. As this skeletal, almost mummy-like looking corpse that's just kind of dragging himself back to Crystal Lake. And in the meantime, there is a John Rambo type wandering veteran making his way through Crystal Lake, looking for work, stops in the diner, asks if anybody's hiring, ends up, bumping into Rick. Rick knows of a widow that lives out on the edge of town that owns a farm that is going to be related to Ethel and Junior. So when Ethel and Junior died, their house was left to her sister, and her sister and her husband moved there, and her husband just passed away. But now she's out there working on the farm by herself, and Rick thinks, she could use some help. So
she needs somebody to clean the shit out of the chicken coop.
Exactly. In fact, that's his first job that he has to do. But when he gets out there, he goes out there, and she's like, I don't need no help. Like, why does Rick think that I need help? I ran this farm. He did nothing. Right. I did it all the work.
Right.
And he's like, well, I'm just looking for honest work. And if you want some help, just, someone to come out there and help lighten your load, I'm happy to do it. Maybe it's time you got to rest. And she's like, now you're starting to make some sense. Go out there and clean the chicken shit. And so she gives him work. She gives him pay. But what she can't give him is a room. And so he's left with this conundrum. He's like, well, that's fine, ma'am. He's like, do you know if there's anything in town? He's like, I don't know, but I checked in town. There's nothing there. Do you think of anything else? And she's like, I don't know where you're going to have to go, but you're going to have to get off my property, because she doesn't quite trust him yet. He's like, fine, I'll sleep in the woods. So he walks through the woods. He ends up coming across some cabins, and he finds Crystal Lake. And he thinks, well, roof over my head is a roof over my head. So he goes into that same cabin that we see, Kyle MacLeod walk into many, many years later. And he says, well, hey, this is as good as any. I'm going to set up shop in here. So begins his life. So as he's beginning his life, kind of settling in and getting used to this town and working at this farm, Jason is making his way, back to the camp, killing people along the way. It's sort of this thing happening in the background while, people are enjoying their lives. And then one day this woman says, that he's working for her for a while, and she finally, starts to kind of melt. The ice starts to melt a little bit. And she's like, what are you where are you staying? We ended up saying, he goes, I found these old cabins out by the lake, and I popped up in one of those. She's like, wait, what cabins? By what lake? I don't know. It looks like an old camp. And she says, get out of there. Do not stay there.
Right.
I'll let you stay in the barn. You can stay in the barn. He's like, well, what is suddenly like, it's kind of nice out there. I kind of like it. I'm away from everybody and all this stuff. And in the meantime, he's dealing with something too. Like he's dealing with some PTSD trauma from his war experiences, kind of those things. And I won't go too far, so I won't spoil the ending, but eventually these two forces meet at Crystal Lake one night. Of course, the night after she says, hey, come and move with me. And he goes, well, I'll go back and I'll spend one more night and I'll think about it. That's the night that Jason comes back. And we actually finally get to talk about, or actually express some of the things that we just talked about, which is the force that runs this area takes over. Because Jason is too weak to fight hand-to-hand combat. He's not going to beat John Rambo in a fist fight right now. He's got no mask. He's got no clothes. He's just, he's like, the Terminator just landed from the future, but he's got no skin.
Yeah.
He's just like nothing. And so the camp sort of starts to play tricks on this veteran, which makes it really cool. And it becomes this different type of story, this different type of Friday the 13th. And I will just say that at the end of it, you sort of see how Jason is reborn. Not that he's taking over this guy's body or anything. We're not doing any body demon jumping snakes or anything like that. But there's sort of like, you see that Jason sort of like collects himself at the end of this story and sort of rebuilds himself as this new thing and closes himself into the camp. And now we see that this new reign of him being in the camp starts now. This new version where he's going to stay out of the limelight. He's not going to be looking for trouble. He's not going to be hunting down teenagers. He's just going to hunker down into the camp, and he's just going to, just tuck in and just hope that no one finds him and just stay home and rest. And that's what he wants to do. And that becomes the story of what happens to Ghost Jason over time. And you see how that sort of leads into Disappear, where Disappear, you see Jason doing his normal duty where he's just protecting his home. Someone invades his territory. He murders them. He gets rid of them and he does the whole thing. But okay, I did all that work. I fought all this way. I got all the way home, but it's still just this. This is just going to be it till the end of time. Like I came all this way just to keep doing this. Mom called me home. She doesn't show up. And now I'm just sitting here killing people again. Like what gives? And you start to get that internal dialogue going in Jason. And that, carries all the way through to Never Hike Alone 2. Like the ending of Never Hike Alone 2 is all built into that. And the fact that, and spoiler alert for people who haven't seen it, but at the end of the movie, when he destroys his mother's head and everything's falling apart for him, and he realizes that like he may have severed the only connection that he has to his mother, that she appears in the water. And in that moment, we were thinking like, you can think of whatever you want, but what she's saying to him is that like, it was never about the head. I've always just been here. I'll always be here. We'll always be together. So stop fighting it and just come home. Mm-hmm. And that's when he sort of allows himself to be taken out. Like at that point, he realizes that there's no use fighting it anymore. Like if he wants rest, he's going to have to just take the L. And, he goes down and, at the end of the movie, when we see that bubble come up, some people will think, oh, Jason's coming back. But I see it as a sigh of relief. I can finally just let go. And that's his spirit releasing and sort of just, the end of him. But we like to, tip the cap. I mean, a lot of people thought Jason was going to jump up on the dock and grab Tommy and Kyle at the end, but that just wasn't the type of ending that I wanted. I didn't want to leave it open-ended in that way. I just wanted to say that like, yeah, Jason has been put down, but he's at rest and he's at peace. And it's going to take a lot to disturb him now. Like you could still wake him up. Like I wouldn't recommend it. But this story, this feud with Tommy, this whole thing, that's all been let go. And, it's time for something new. And then, the ending with Hikerman 5000, where also people think that I'm going to bring, it's asking to allude to another story. Mm-hmm. That has sort of something to do with Jason, but not as much as one would think. If we were to continue the story, the next installment probably wouldn't have Jason in it at all. But it would sort of still speak to Friday the 13th and be a different type of story, which is a lot of fun. And the only other story I'd want to tell is Pamela's Tale, which really brings it back to the beginning, that really kind of cements their Jason and Pamela's psychic bond after his death, and the fact that the curse is sort of using Jason's spirit to haunt Pamela. I always kind of said that, they loved each other so much that Jason couldn't pass on. He couldn't pass on without his mother, so he got stuck in between. And then she gave up his life for him to return. And so it was sort of like a one of passing of the other. So that's how their lives are connected in that way. So I would love to be able to sort of put that in perspective. And that would be sort of the full canvas of this story. But I'm happy that I was able to at least answer the questions from Never Hike Alone 1 and, Never Hike in the Snow and put all those things together. But it's fun to tell stories of the past too and have them, make the things that we've already filmed make even more sense.
Yeah. Now I'm glad that you talked about the ending a little bit too, because I didn't want to give it away, but since you already have, that's great. What I saw when I saw that bubble come up through the mask at the very end, that's neat that you say it's like a sigh or like, you can finally like take a rest.
Yeah.
I just thought it was just like kind of a nod to like a part 6, like, Jason's down there, he's chained to the bottom, but he's got his eye open. So it was just kind of like, haha, there might be another one. But
there's a little bit of that too. And I think there's also the part 1 as well, because part 1 ends with the bubbles on the water. And that's something I wanted to echo as well.
Yeah. So like, and then with the beginning of 7, Jason's still down there. He didn't rip the chain off. He didn't do any of those things. He was content or fine or just in his place being buried in the lake until Tina started with her telekinesis waking him up. So I liked how you had kind of a reverence for that kind of feel of a part 6, but also keeping it totally fresh. Because if you would have had Jason come up and grab Tommy and Kyle off the dock, I would have been like, well, that's kind of, honestly, in all due respect, I would have thought, well, that's kind of cheap because that's kind of the end of 2009. How many times do you need somebody jumping out of the lake to end the movie? But just that little bubble at the end is a sigh. Now, see, I like that. I appreciate that. Now,
and I think that to end on emotion too. I think that I didn't want to end on shock. That was what the first movie was about. This was about finishing the story, not about reopening, like ripping the Band-Aid off right away.
And we've seen Tommy go through so much shit.
I know. Enough. Let him rest.
I mean, the guy's 12. His mom's, killed everybody there. He lost his dog, probably. Who knows what happened to Gordon? But just everything that he's gone through from the mental institution to Camp Forest Green, everything else. It's too bad you couldn't. Jennifer Cook is one of my favorites, Friday Girls of all time, and it would have been nice for her to be a part of it. But you had Tracy Savage, and then I love Tracy Savage. So you had Tracy Savage come back and play a news reporter because that was her gig in real life. And then you had Larry Zerner, guest of the program. You had him back as a mayor. Just like having all these characters come back or alumni come back, not necessarily as the character they portrayed, but having them come back and have them be a part. As a fan, I really enjoyed seeing that. I thought that was great.
We were tempted to put a scar on Larry's neck.
Like Shelley lived.
But we had to, what was it called? A backer bought that thing, bought that name for that character thinking I was going to play the mayor. So we were sort of like, he was our surprise for this movie. We wanted to come out swinging. And obviously Larry's been such a big proponent of Friday the 13th, in his alumni years, supporting the film, showing up to part 3 screenings, talking to fans about the legal issues and walking us through it and holding our hand. You just felt that Larry kind of really cemented himself, obviously, and he gave Jason his mask. So such a great iconic role, and Shelley being one of the favorite characters, but his participation with fans now, and being in, people know him from the game as well. So to have him in there, I think was just another, sign of, keeping the spirit alive and giving fans something that they want. It's something that they want to see, somebody they want to see. And also a shout out to a few other alumni cameos that kind of snuck in. Ron Sloan, Judy Aronson, Cindy Kanai, Adam Marcus, Tom McLaughlin, and Laura Marie Taylor. When it fades to black and it looks like Tommy's going to die, there's a bunch of voices that come in as news chatter. Those are all alumni, and all those voices of alumni echo into Tracy, which is really cool. So they all built up. They were all people that I'd either worked with on a project or, obviously Judy I worked with on 13 Fanboy, Tracy I worked with 13 Fanboy, Ron Sloan I've worked with on a couple of projects now, Cindy on a few projects now. She was in Pathosis for us. She was in Dylan's New Nightmare. Laura Marie Taylor I met on the festival circuit. I was on her podcast and said, hey, you want to throw a voice in real quick? And she did. Adam, I met on the film festival circuit, and he's been a champion of what we've done and really helped out Deb with 13 Fanboy. And we've been friends over the years. And he jumped right on board. And then Tom McLaughlin was one of my first supporters when I made Never Hike Alone 1. He reached out, he came to our first screening. He watched the film just the other day, sent me a nice long note about it. But, I hit him up and hey, play a newscaster. And he gave us this great newscaster voice. So, it's just nice to be able to kind of put those things in for fans to realize that like, hey, we're not only doing this and telling a new story, but we're also keeping the old spirit alive. And we're putting the people in there that we know that you love. We want you to have fun with this.
Yeah. Now, Vincent, we wanted Jason in the Snow. We got him from you. We wanted some gratuitous violence. We got that from you. And we got great mythology, great acting, and we got that from you. One thing I want to point out that I think is great and what is a hallmark of some of the better Friday the 13th films. Now, admittedly, I like them all. But what I think really helps with Friday the 13th is when you really have a bond with the characters that get killed and die. We see that a lot in the earlier Paramount ones, especially like number 6, 4, 3, 2. You show such great care in like showing like what these murders do to the community, what they do to the families. And I think that is something that a slasher movie just kind of neglects sometimes. And I'm so glad that when you're putting together a Friday the 13th film that you made a real huge effort to make that a hallmark, like really showing what these the effects of Jason's mayhem has done to the community, the people, the families, the survivors. It's great. It's everything that I wanted to see in a Friday the 13th film. And you didn't even have to go into space.
Yeah, right. It was something that I was inspired early on by Blue Ruin, Jeremy Saulnier, or Soliner, whoever you want to say. I like Saulnier. It sounds more artistic. But I think one of the things I learned in that movie when I watched it was just like the impact of death, the impact of pain, and how it can permeate and, the what it can do to a family, what it can do to people. And it was just sort of imagining that crossed with what happens after a Friday the 13th. What is that family in part 4 that's crying in that waiting room, that's lost a loved one? And, I think that that's the most, other than Rob Deere, and then Clay's character in the remake, that who have really been affected by loss in these films. And then obviously Tommy carrying really the greatest weight of character loss throughout the entire series. So if that makes him the most appealing character, then why don't you apply this across the board? Why don't you start using this as, different ways to sort of get people motivated to get in, and then, not really waste them sort of the way Rob Deere gets wasted in Final Chapter, because he is this big buildup where he's going to fight Jason and he gets his ass whooped in 2 seconds. And so there is a little bit of a letdown that Rob doesn't have an actual, a fight between Rob and Ted White in that basement could have been really cool. If Joe Zito is an amazing director. I'm not taking anything away from Joe. He's cool. I sat down with him. He told me some really cool facts. But I would have been okay, we're going to get this fight going down here. We're going to get heads smashed off, guardrail, handrails, and, we'll get some of the stuff involved. We're going to get them tussling, get some real, but they didn't really, that wasn't the way films were made back then. But now we're actually able to give people a fighting chance through these films to fight back against Jason, not just be a helpless dummy just to take whatever shot comes their way, but that Andrew's going to fight back, that, Tommy's going to fight back, that's happening. But even the people along the way, as minor characters as Gino and Jamie are at the beginning of the movie, or the Ranger, or, Denny and Axel, all of these people feel like they fit into a life, that they have a life outside what's going on in this movie. The nurse and the security guard have this relationship and obviously have this thing going on. And it's, Kyle, Anna, and Kyle, Diana, Tommy, and Rick that are really all sort of dealing with the core aspect of it. And everyone else is just having life outside of it. But, when these characters meet their end, even when Tommy sees, Denny get killed, how much that affects him. And it starts with sort of the mentorship role that you can see is established with them when she walks up and she says she's studying to become a nurse. And I wrote that character based on first my mom and then a lot of friends who were EMT workers who worked really hard and became nurses and, put in a lot of work in school and like studied on their shifts and did those things. And it's like, this was somebody who was like putting a lot of time and effort into their life to make their life better. And before they ever got a chance to reach their potential, Jason snuffed him out all over because he wanted to kill this hiker who happened to get away. And that resonated with Tommy's story too, because the way he relates to Kyle and to say, listen, you went in there with, innocent intentions, but now look at the results. He's like, I went in to destroy Jason. And for the last 30 years, this has all been my fault. Mm-hmm. So it's, I think that there's a lot of, there's a lot of things in the film that I think fans have been thinking for a long time, because we always see the meme like every death after part 6 is this idiot's fault. And so
right.
we laugh about it, but to actually see it as a real context, imagine living with that, all these missing posters on the wall. And that's the thing I like about, Tommy and Rick's character too, is they both have the same problem. There are too many missing person posters on the wall, and they both feel responsible because Tommy can't find Jason and Rick can't prove it's Tommy. And they're both fighting these battles that neither of them can win. And in the meantime, they're just getting in each other's way. And that relationship, almost in a First Blood standpoint, and the fact of the way that Teasel and Rambo don't get along, and it's because they don't get along that the entire thing escalates, is sort of what's going on in Crystal Lake. It's a little bit of Brody and the mayor. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? The beaches got to stay open. People got to camp. We got to get that tourist money. But at the same time, like Rick not wanting to accept that there's otherworldly things at play, and that it's got to be this jerk who locked him in a cell 10 years ago and allowed him to go out and murder all these people and get away with it, including his best friend and boss. I don't know. I just think with all of that motivation, with everything leading into it, I just think it makes it a more compelling story rather than like just, fresh sets of characters showing up with really nothing to do but party and get killed.
Yeah, for sure. That's what I appreciate about it too, because we're getting the body count that we want, but we're doing it in a much different, fresh perspective, I think. Mm-hmm. And I really I rediscovered The Lost Boys again recently, and it's the same kind of thing. Like there's all these missing kid posters and missing person posters all over the town, and like Grandpa knows it's vampires, and probably most people kind of do, but they don't want to shake the boat, or they don't want to cause trouble or whatever it is. And it's the same kind of thing. Like we know that there's this, there's something going on in our neck of the woods. You see that in 2009 too, where the old lady who's kind of the prophet of doom, she's kind of, well, people don't go missing around here. She's dead.
Yeah.
If they go up missing, they're dead. Yeah. And it's like, everybody kind of knows, but nobody, stay out of his woods.
Yeah, I know. That's a silly film.
Which one?
It's the 2009. I feel like they rely too much on.
Do you like 2009?
I don't. I find it to be like so reliant on cliche scenes that don't fit together as a complete narrative. Like the scenes are fine on their own. Like if this was just a one-off scene that was just happening someplace all over town, that'd be fine. But when you start to like look at it in context of what they were trying to set up versus like the overall story, there's just like things are just happening to happen. And some of the most important moments in the movie are sort of like rushed through. And I just felt that like with a $19 million budget and, 11 other films to study and a lot of things to look back on and say, okay, there's a way to do this and not to do this, that there were too many of like, let's just do it the old fashioned way and just do it just like this. And they won't even notice and it won't even be a big deal. They won't look below. The Friday the 13th fans won't look below the surface. Just keep it surface level. We don't have to get deep, man. This is Friday the 13th. It's a cheeseburger. Yeah. And it's like, I'm sorry, but your Friday the 13th fans have grown up. We've become cinephiles. We'd love to see that other franchises have gone in depth, have taken some time to like really flesh out their characters and make, I think even with the advent, as soon as Scream hit the market, you had to start writing a better slasher. You couldn't rely on the old stuff. And so there's just sort of, and especially when you go back and look at it now, it's just a film that feels out of touch. And it feels a film that feels like it's having a lot of fun, but almost too much fun. And it forgot that it also had to make sense. And there were just lots of opportunities.
What part of it would you say that like Doesn't make sense because I'm coming at it from a standpoint. I don't know how to make a film. I know how to sit down and watch a film. So like when I watch like 9, 10, 11, and then we come up to 12, I'm like, oh, finally we kind of got away from 9, 10, 11. And now we're kind of back to what could be considered a Friday the 13th film. So that's how I kind of looked at it. And I enjoyed a lot of the kills and everything. And I thought Derek Mears was great. But so where was the disconnect, or what did you think that,
like, for example, like I just remember leading up to the film, there was, a big talk about it being a very smart Jason. And I just don't find it to be a very smart Jason if he's standing on the side of the lake shooting at people in boats who haven't even crossed into his territory. Like, how do people take boats out on this lake then? I mean, obviously this boat's been down there. They must have been going up and down this lake multiple times. Jason's just murdering people randomly. What's he going to do when the cops find that dude with an arrow in his head crashed up on the lake somewhere?
Right.
He just wants to be left alone. But today he's going to go out on the edge of the lake. He's going to go pick off some kids because he's bored. It's like,
okay, I got
what's going on? Okay. It's like, at the beginning of the movie, you have that hick guy kind of turn around and be like, somebody's been stealing the kerosene. And you're like, okay, well, why would Jason be stealing kerosene in the middle of the day? Doesn't that seem like a Night Stalker thing to do, to climb into the building when no one's there? How smart is this Jason really?
Right. Okay.
And then the whole thing with like, I think for me, it was like, it was the combination of the tunnels. I wasn't a big fan of that. I just thought that was very odd. Like, did he dig them? That seems like a lot of tunnel digging. But it also looks like there's like mine shafts down there. So they built a camp on top of mine shafts. And there's just a lot of things that are being, they rushed through the opening of the movie, or like that Pamela sequence, which again, this woman is dragging this machete that would never be at a summer camp. Like, I don't know where this thing came from, what shelf it was purchased off of. She obviously pulled it out of a movie. Like, it's a movie prop. She's not dragging a machete. She's dragging a movie prop around. And it's just sort of like, this is like sort of ungrounded. And then it was, is Jason dead or is he undead? Like, pick a lane, go that way. Oh, Jason's alive. Okay. He's a human being in this movie. That's great. Well, how does he survive all this stuff? So wait, now you're saying he's undead and he's superhuman, and now you're going here. So it was just, everything was so much like, and then like the big grand finale was so convoluted. It wasn't as like, part 2, it's the one shot to the shoulder. In part 3, it's the shot to the head. In part 4, it's the shot to the face. And this, it was like a chain drag to like getting his head hit and then slowly stabbing him halfway through his body. And it was just like, just a very like, this seems right, and just like not really focused. And it's not that the bones weren't there. I feel like the script and I feel like the overall story was really good. Someone goes missing in Crystal Lake. Someone goes looking for them and, and stirs the pot, and Jason pops out and starts murdering people. There's a very good motivations there. I just feel that like when the script was handing off to be produced and directed, I think Marcy is a super nice guy. I just want to preference all these things. I take nothing personally. I just don't feel like he was on top of the Friday the 13th lore as one should be if they're going to take the mantle of redefining the lore of this film. And he very much went at it with this very superficial knowledge of like, well, this is what a Friday the 13th is. So we're not going to try to, fix anything. I'm just going to kind of do the same. And it was such an opportunity to set the franchise up for multiple films. And I feel that there were so many things that happened in the first one that make it really hard for you to explain what's going on in a second one without somebody or something sort of like, how do you wash this all away? And it just felt like it was going to go back to the old Friday the 13th where, well, how does it connect? Who cares? It's Friday the 13th. You know what I mean? It's just, whatever, and I wanted something more. As a fan, I wanted something what I built with Never Hike Alone, which something that felt connected, well set up. There are things in the first one, you're like, well, whatever happened with that? Well, when you get to the second one, you'll get that. And then we're going to set things up in the second one. And the third one, we're going to pay them off even more and reward, viewers for paying attention and make them want to come back to the theater and not have those huge drop-off numbers that it had when people finally, with bated anticipation, went to the theater and saw this movie and got something that felt, I don't know. I was the most excited person. I walked out and I was like, why am I not like completely enthralled right now. Like, this is everything I ever wanted. Like, what's going on? And it took many years of insight to be like, well, these are the things that I actually wanted to see. And this is actually what I got. And really, I think the nice culmination of this is that this is what led me to want to write something like Never Hike Alone and be like, yes, you're onto something with this, but you need to take it a step further. And so that's why we tried to do things in Never Hike Alone 2, where you see Jason systematically tricking Tommy by the ambulance and setting them up and working his way through people and not making too big of a noise and sort of making sure that like all of his bases are covered and doing those things to even set it up like Tommy did it. And it's, you see the way he works through and picks, it's very methodical and well thought out. He's thinking a few steps ahead. And the reason why he does this now is because he had all those films in the past to teach him that maybe running full head of steam into everything isn't the best idea. Because the last time I did this, I ended up washing out to the ocean through a big toxic sludge waste thing. And it's just, I don't want to do that anymore. So I'm going to make sure that I get in and I get out with as little damage as me as possible, because there's almost so much energy I have left. And so he's motivated to be smarter, and he's motivated to be a keen killer. And he's been doing this for, years now, wiping people off the map without a trace and earning them that new moniker of Ghost Jason. So I felt that like what I was trying to say to the studios back to was like, hey, this is what you told me that I was going to get in 2009. Well, this is actually what I wanted to see in 2009. And that's really how I really approached that.
I watched your film and I think too, when I had Dave Bruckner and Nick Antosca on at separate times and talking about their vision of what they wanted to do with Friday the 13th. And it was a very thoughtful, cool take on the franchise. And so when I watch your film and I see this very thoughtful and very exciting, cool take on the franchise, I put you right up there with them. And I'm glad that there are people out there. Like, I can read the Antosca script, and I talked to David, and I could see in my mind, things and how they would play out in my brain, and watching your films. And I like how you took the ghost cut. Let's talk about the ghost cut real quick, where you took the music video for Disappear, you took Never Hike in the Snow, or Never Hike Alone, Never Hike in the Snow, and you fleshed them out, like you put them in kind of in one package, kind of recut them and put them together. I love that, because I watched them all separately, and then when you made the ghost cut, I watched the ghost cut before I watched part 2. And there's just like, there are people out there that know Friday the 13th has so much potential and can be something thought-provoking and something that, a little more cerebral with a body count. And that's what I really appreciate, for sure.
Yeah. And I mean, we really made it, a big reason why we made it is because everyone was getting confused thinking that Never Hike in the Snow was a sequel. And obviously it's hard when you're not a mass marketing sort of, big studio entity. It's tough to keep people up on the up and up and like with everything that's going on. And, they missed the announcement to say like, hey, we're doing a 4-part series and it's actually going to start in the past. And we're going to tell this story that leads into Never Hike Alone. And, people aren't reading the fine print. They're just saying, ooh, Jason and Snow.
Yeah, right.
Same guys who made Never Hike Alone, I'm in. And so they did it. And then, so we put the ghost cut together as a way to sort of just remind people of like, here's how it's flowing. Like, here's the story direction of what we want to do. I was feeling the impact of people feeling a little let down by, Never Hike in the Snow being a short film and not having the next episode out just to see where the story was going to go but to say like, okay, we'll do a little bit more. And what I like about the ghost cut is that we're able to put in like a new voiceover from Tom Matthews at the beginning of Disappear, which isn't on the normal music video. We're able to slip in, that piece from Tracy Savage that introduces Kyle as the new hiker, and do these little things, little surprises for people that sort of help with that. And we also had a bunch of, guest voiceovers on that too. I mean, we called back most of the same people that I listed off before. So, it helped us put into context to say like, hey, listen, in the last few years with, roughly, a little under $200,000, we've made 83 minutes worth of material that, fits right now into this nice little anthological package. Now let's go out when we do Never, and, at the time when we're doing the ghost cut, I'm thinking, okay, COVID will let up after the winter. Right. We can go after this in the spring. So we got this thing saying like, hey, you want the sequel to the ghost cut? We make Never Hike Alone 2. Because if it goes Disappear, and everyone's like, isn't it Never Hike Alone 3? And I'm like, no, it's Disappear, Never Hike in the Snow, Never Hike Alone 1 and Never Hike Alone 2. Like it goes in that order. So it's definitely, and I get it. I get why people are confused. I'm just hoping that as we are able to put it all together and put them in, packages and things like that, that as the more people watch them, they get it, or they watch the ghost cut and it's all sort of laid out for them.
I love it. I love the whole package. The thing's great. And people can go to YouTube. Womp Stomp Films is the channel. Subscribe, watch it. It's over 1 million, well over 1 million views, and we're like 10 days from it, right?
Yeah, it got hit 1 million after 8 days. Right now we're at like 1.2, climbing towards 1.3 pretty quickly.
I love it.
Yeah, it jumped. I mean, it was surprising. I was very pleased with the opening week numbers. That's for sure.
Fantastic. Well, it's been a real pleasure to have you on the show once again, and I'll be following your career and everything else, and all the news from Womp Stomp Films, and hopefully you'll make another trip to Crystal Lake. Like, you got a lot of imagination. I know you care about the franchise a lot, and that's why I'm going to ask you this question, because I asked this when I hosted part 2 the other night. Paul Holt, did he die at the end of part 2?
I'm going off. I asked Amy Steele the same exact thing, and the look that she gave me is that Paul was gone. Paul is dead. And I know that he was going to die in the opening of the next movie anyway. His head was going to end up in the washing machine. She was going to be at college, and she was going to find Paul's head in the dryer, I think.
What?
So yeah.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Where do I find that information?
If you ever get Amy Steele at a Q&A, ask her about the script that she received for Friday the 13th Part 2, where she is at college, and that's the opening scene is her doing her laundry and finding Paul's head in the dryer. And then the whole movie's about her. It was about her being in a hospital, sort of like locked away for being nuts, and Jason comes in to try to get her.
Wow. Now, see, when I met her at Crypticon and I had my picture taken with her, I was way too nervous because I had such a crush on her when I was a kid.
I had trouble. I can't. I'm like, I don't even know what to say to her either. I'm like, oh my God. But I did from way back in the audience. I was like, hey.
I met Adrienne King, and I'm like, and when she's been on the show too, but like when I met her in person, I was just like, oh my gosh, I was so.
Yeah, it's weird when you meet your heroes. You're like, oh, what do I say to this person? They don't know, like the effect that they've had because we've just been watching them on our entire lives, and to see them in like the flesh is sometimes it's a very odd feeling. I know that when you see somebody in real life.
Must be cool working with them then.
Oh yeah, I mean, getting to work with Adrian on Jason Rising was awesome, and then being able to work with a lot of people on Friday 13 Fanboy, Kane Hodder, CJ Graham, go down the list of that movie. It was a ton of fun. It's the first time I worked with Tom, it was definitely that way where it was just tough. You know what I mean? Like I was just like, how do I direct my hero? Is he going to take me seriously?
Yeah.
But after a while, it's sort of like the sheen fades, and then you realize they're people, and then you sort of get comfortable and you can be yourself around them. And all of a sudden it's just like talking to a friend. And by the time I got around to helping Jason Rising out with Adrian, I really felt comfortable like having those conversations and giving direction and, helping, explain those things without feeling like, oh my God, are they not going to want to do what we want to do? Like, no, they're actors. They want to be told what to do. Like, they can't wait for you to tell them what to do. Like they're waiting with bated breath to be told, like, this is what I want. This is what we need out of the scene. Go do it. And so once you start to talk to, and I credit a lot of that to Vinny Guastafaro because I got to sit there on his acting class and I watch him work with actors and talk about these things, about getting the direction, about making choices, about committing to a direction and what is expected of a director when they need help. And so that really, really helped me. And I think Vin really helped me sort of like, build that confidence to feel like what the words that were coming out of my mouth were something that an actor wanted to hear versus like, result direction or anything that we typically feel like is the right way to direct is actually like our instinctual way to want to direct is actually the absolute worst way you could do it. You have to find ways to sort of coax, performances out of people in different ways, give them different goals and sets that aren't necessarily like the target. Because when anybody tries to do something, they actually do it worse. Like we say, you have to do it just like this, then they will give you everything but the way you want it. If you get, so it's sort of like that type of technique. And he really helped me, work on my dialogue and my communication with actors. And so that experience really helped open me up as I've gone on and done other things and worked on bigger shows and worked in, professional television, working with actors, being a first team PA and things like that. Overall this time I've just gotten used to it. And so it's nice to sort of have that rapport with, the most expensive people on set, really.
Yeah. Well, I just got to tell you, as a podcast host and also as a horror fan and a Friday the 13th fanatic, thank you. Thanks for making these films. I really enjoy them, and I'll share them with my, I share these movies like with my kids. Like, this is what I watched when I was a kid, and now I'm like able to like show them something like new and exciting and quality. So as a fan, as a podcast
and actually
host,
pretty kid friendly too. I mean, there's a lot of F-bombs and stuff, but
they heard that in the hallway at school. It's okay.
Yeah, no, they're fine. Yeah, they're already getting that. But before you go, I do want to remind people that if they do catch the film and they haven't seen it yet, or they didn't know about the Indiegogo, we still are in demand and open on Indiegogo. So if anyone wants to order a Blu-ray, who knows what's ever going to happen down the road with YouTube or if things get taken down. But if you want a copy that you can keep forever, that will be HD and have lots of cool bonus features, we have Never Hike Alone, Never Hike in the Snow, The Ghost Cut, and Never Hike Alone for pre-order on Blu-ray. Lots of other cool items as well. We just released the battle damaged version of the Ghost Hawk, which is really cool. So that's now available on the crowdfund. And if anybody has ever any questions or they ever want to know about crowdfunding, they can email me at wompstompfilms@gmail.com, WOMPSTOMPFILMS@gmail. A lot of people throw pitches at me and they want me to make movies. I really don't have time for that. But what I can do is I can give you this sort of list of to-dos that if you wanted to run your own crowdfund and if you're interested in making your own fan film, I'm happy to share that with anyone who's interested and, wish them best on the project. And we'll, from time to time answer questions from people who get into production trouble and help you get through it.
Yeah. Well, I'll make sure to have all those links for your information on the show notes. But also, thanks for supporting creative people out there, because I try and do that with my show. I have authors and filmmakers and documentary people and experts in the field, and I'm always trying to promote their work so they can continue to do the work that they do. So my very best to you and everybody over there at Womp Stomp. And Vincent, thanks so much for making these films. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks for having me today, and thanks for watching.
Well, there you go, everybody. Vincent DiSanti, Never Hike Alone. Never Hike in the Snow. Disappear. Never Hike Alone Part 2. The final chapter? Who knows? You haven't heard the last from Vincent DiSanti, that's for sure. What a filmmaker. Honestly, if you haven't watched these things yet, what's stopping you? Like, come on, let's go. They're free. YouTube. Support him. Support all the creatives that are out there expressing themselves. There used to be a sticker from SST Records that said corporate rock still sucks. And sometimes corporate movies suck. So support these independent filmmakers. That was a special kind of last minute episode that I was able to put together with Vincent. I just wanted to talk to him and express my admiration for him in putting together such a great Friday the 13th film. And everybody, there you go. That's my Halloween gift to you all. Because there's another episode of Necronomicast coming just days away on November 1st. Director Chris Holt from, what's it called? It's a Netflix show, The Devil on Trial. I knew it would come to me. See, I'm a professional. So happy Halloween. Go get those full-size candy bars. Thank you for listening. Thank you for supporting the show. It's time to get some sleep.